Okay, so I just did a short film for Blurb about winter photography. But now I have to do a long film about winter photography. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I live in New Mexico. It happens to be winter. How simple could this possibly be? And then I went outside and it's probably 50, 55 degrees out here today, sunny. But just so you know that I am in New Mexico and it could potentially be winter. I'm gonna go like this. Look, snow, snow, snow. All right, people. Whoa, almost tripped and fell. Let's get on with it. Okay, I lied. I'm not quite ready to start the film yet. There's something I have to say. So, I don't know what happened exactly, other than the fact that a couple of days ago, what did I do? I looked in my spam folder on email and was astounded how many people had reached out to me, basically because of the YouTube channel, and had emailed me, and it ended up in my spam folder. And it's actually kind of horrifying because one of the things that I sort of pride myself on is I always respond to communications. I always have. This goes all the way back to the beginning of all the digital communications that we've had. I always answer my YouTube comments, and I always answer my email, and I always answer my messages. So what I want to say here is, if for some reason you have reached out to me and I have not responded, that is not by choice or by plan. That is because something went wrong. So bear with me. I'm hoping to solve some of this with my new website and the Discord server, and also just having a contact form on the site where people can reach out to me, where hopefully it doesn't end up in spam, because I have a sinking suspicion I've missed a lot of people, and that doesn't make me feel too good. So that's where we are. Well, hello. So I've come in from the frigid, frozen tundra of the New Mexico winter, as I showed you before, and now I'm sitting inside. And because this is a film about winter photography, which is more of a ramble, I think if you're looking for specific photography tips for winter, you're gonna be disappointed, but I'm gonna ramble as I do about things in general in winter. One of the set of questions I get on this YouTube channel, which always comes in snarky fashion. It's always snarky, and I love you for the snark because it keeps me warm. One of the things that happens is people go, hey, why are you wearing a jacket while you're filming? Don't you have heat in your house? And oddly enough, yes, here at New Mexico at 7,000 feet in the winter, we do have heat. But here's the point. And I learned this in reverse, which I'll tell you in a minute. If I turn the heat up to this house, to equatorial levels, and I'm sitting here in a t-shirt, and then I go outside and try to perform in, let's say, 15-degree weather, I find that I don't perform. In fact, I find that I get cold really fast. But if I leave this house around 60, which is, warm enough, but sort of more comfortable to have a jacket on inside, then when I go out into a 15-degree day, I seem to acclimate much, much better. My office, which is somewhere in this general vicinity, that direction would be north of here. You'll never see it because it's not very exciting. My office has no heat whatsoever. Yes, there's a heater in there, and yes, I could turn it on, and no, I do not turn it on, and I do that for very specific reasons. Because when my office is cold, I get in and I get out. I get in, I get her done, and I get out. I don't sit, I don't dilly-dally, I don't waste time, I don't procrastinate, I don't surf the web, I don't do social media, I just get in, I work, and I go. And that is one reason, people, to blow my own horn here a little bit, that is one reason I am so efficient and why I can get so much done, is because I don't waste time. And so keeping it cold in there, which was sort of started accidentally, I simply forgot to turn the heat on, it actually worked. And I told my wife, and she's like, you are straight up crazy. Like, why would you do this? And I'm like, look at what I'm doing, and look how it works. And in fact, I throw one more layer on, I go in, yeah, and okay, maybe it's complete sealskin with a snorkel hood, but I go in there and I take care of it and I get out. So that's a good point here to start this film on. I want to repeat my apology from earlier, from outside, about if you've reached out to me and I haven't responded. That is not like me. To me, the point of being on YouTube, The point of having a website and having a community is to correspond with said community. So I don't look at you as a nuisance. I don't look at you as a responsibility. I look at you as someone that potentially has a shared interest with me, because obviously we've somehow seemed to meet up in this universe of ours. So if you've reached out and I haven't responded, I'm sorry, because it's probably in the spam folder and I just checked it for the first time in probably 18 months. I don't like the spam folder. Although I have had spam when I was in Hawaii with a plate lunch, and it was exceptional. So anyway, I'm trying to remedy that. I think the Discord server on the new version of the site will help in some ways, because I'll release the server and you'll be able to connect with me. I'll be on there for certain periods of time, and then I will disappear for periods of time. But I just want to say sorry. Okay, before we get to the winter part, I want to bring this up too, because it does relate in some way, shape, or form to winter photography. My YouTube habits are not what you would expect. I often get people sending me clips or links to YouTube saying, have you seen this? And 99% of the time, those clips revolve around photography-related YouTube things. For the most part, I do not watch photography-related YouTube things. And the reason is because when I started to investigate what was on YouTube, not all, but the vast majority of the content did not hold my interest. And when I say interest, that is not attention. Attention is superficial to me. Interest is a level of depth a little bit higher. There's plenty of things that get my attention, but don't hold my interest. And that is what was happening with YouTube, photography in particular. It was dominated by people who were tech-related, who really didn't seem to have any background in photography, who really weren't capable of making, at least not yet, making great photography. And so I just kept getting let down. I would try to get into the film and then it would be like, oh, this is the same stuff, this person, or they just didn't show any work at all because they probably weren't that thrilled with what they had captured. So I don't really do that. The YouTube channel that I probably spend the most amount of time on, and for those of you thinking this is gonna be photo related, now's where the depression sets in, is I love a guy named Jim Baird, Adventurer. And Jim Baird is a Canadian dude. And if you've ever met a Canadian dude, just like a normal Canadian dude, or dudette for that matter, they're awesome. Canadians are great. If I was gonna flee the US and look for a country that I would live in, and I could somehow convince Canadian customs, which is no joke. If any of you have been detained in Canada with customs, if any of you have had that happen, they don't screw around. So I'm not saying I could even get into Canada, let alone find a reason for them to allow me to live there. But if I was looking for a country to depart the United States, Canada would be on my list. Jim Baird calls himself an adventurer. He was a guy who won a television show that was they dropped people off on a desert island, or not a desert island, a remote island in BC. And he and his brother, they were both on the show. He has a brother named Ted, and yes, you could say Jim and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Somehow these guys managed to survive like way longer than anyone else. And they came out like emaciated, but they were, these are just Canadian guys who go out in the bush and they do what they do, which is multi-day, long distance canoe trips. And they don't do stupid stuff for views. A lot of the outdoor channels, a lot of the bushcraft people, the survival people, the adventure people, they'll fake their death. They'll fake an accident. They'll fake being in danger. They'll fake having their car broken into. They'll fake anything to get views. The Bairds release films that are hours in duration. I'm not joking. They will release a film. It is multiple hours in duration. And you know what? If I had time, I would watch the entire thing. It's not sexy. It's not fancy. There's no super cool transitions and bumpers on the front and back. None of that crap, because it doesn't matter, because what they're doing is what they do. These are two guys that if they didn't have a camera, they'd still be out in the same locations doing the exact same things and no one would know about it. And I have a great appreciation for that. And I'm much more interested in guys like that. In fact, my goal is to somehow trick the Bairds into allowing me to go with them on one of these trips. Even if if no one films the trip, I just want to go. I want to fish for tank walleyes. I want to fish for pike. I want to camp, and I want to get out into these northern Manitoba places where I've been to in the past. I used to go to Canada every year, and I've been a lot of the sort of distant places up in Manitoba and the territories. I love it up there. That's what I watch on YouTube, just so you know, because at least nobody was asking for me to answer that. Okay, let's talk a little about winter photography. I'm going to break this down into palette, mood, gear, and clothing for no particular reason. And then an ethereal point at the end of this. Okay, winter is the season typically associated with isolation, darkness. Often depression is associated with it. I know that when I was in Alaska doing a story and talked to someone who lived in a town that's in darkness for 6 months a year, she told me some horror stories about depression and about sort of what people would do to each other when left alone in these long, dark spaces. However, there is a flip side of winter that I prefer to dwell on, and that is why I live in New Mexico and not Alaska, although I love Alaska. But it's sunny here pretty much all the time. But winter is also a season of rebirth because it is the end of one year and the beginning of the other. Now, if you live in Australia, everything's upside down. I have no idea what happens there. I think the Easter Bunny comes in winter. I think that's the big thing in Australia. I'm not positive, though. And the Easter Bunny is not actually a bunny. It's like a kangaroo or something else. But, the concept is basically the same, and I'm almost positive I'm right about that. So it's that rebirth is the part that I want to focus on because it's positive, and I think it's also a very, very good mental place to put yourself in at the end of the year as a photographer to assess what you've been able to amass during the year, and then also what you want to accomplish as the new year begins. And I don't know about you, my birthday, I just turned 53. Oh, my kidneys. I just turned 53, and 2022 looks like, unless something catastrophic happens, it looks like it's going to be a badass year. I'm about to depart the country. I just wrote a story, and I know I'm rambling. I just wrote a blog post called Think Globally, Shoot Locally. Having said that, I'm about to leave the country to go on an expedition of sorts. And yes, I will be taking my camera. And yes, I'll be photographing for probably the first time in a long time where I don't have another responsibility on this expedition other than making pictures. So I don't really know what to do. It's been so long since I've done this. I'm a bit nervous photographically, but it's part of the master plan for 2022. I've got several trips. I've got a lot of work to be done here. I've got all my blurb stuff. Winter is the season of rebirth. Let's keep that in mind. Number one here, let's talk about palette. I think, and again, depending on where you are in the winter, if you live in San Antonio, Texas in the winter, your palette is oddly enough not going to change that much from winter to summer to spring to fall. There is a little winter season there, but it's primarily based on temperature more than anything else. Not real drastic changes in the light, changes in the sky, but winter provides a palette. And I'm going to show you right now winter sky in New Mexico, what the winter in New Mexico looks like. And man, this sky is unbeatable. That's what I'm talking about with palette. I think there's a warm side to the palette and there's a cold side to the palette. I think winter often provides bluish, cold light because the sun's rays are weaker, the days are shorter, and it creates this palette that you have to identify, adapt to, and then run with. One of the things that I love about winter is you're often able to make color photographs that look monotone because when that gray sky happens and it flattens everything out, it allows you to sort of just contextualize where the color is in the frame. And so for a black and white photographer like me, it's actually one of my favorite seasons to photograph in. So think about palette as number one. Number two, think about mood. Again, short days, darkness. Some places the sun barely rises. Thank God I don't live there, but I would love to visit just to say that I had and say, oh yeah, I can handle that. I would never be able to handle that. I am laying on the patio waiting for the sun to come up every morning. Mood. Winter brings quiet. Winter brings stillness. Winter brings that monotone. Everything that encompasses mood. And mood is something I'm about to make a separate film on. And my concept of this upcoming film is that I will take mood over perfection any day of the week. I think a lot of times in photography, especially in the online space, for whatever reason, and I could probably guess at the reason, it's a lot easier to fixate on the technical aspects of photography and the how-to aspects of photography as opposed to the actual images that you create. Because creating great images, truly great images, not images that get buzz online, because that often has nothing to do with whether or not they're good. Truly great images are rare, incredibly rare. And so I think mood, simplicity, the idea is I will take mood over perfect any day. Most of the perfect photographs I see are boring. I know photographers, professionals, who are known as people who can craft the technically perfect image. Technically perfect image. They're very successful photographers. They have big followings. They teach workshops. Their work bores me to death because, yes, it is technically perfect, but it often just lacks that spark, that soul that you look at and go, Jesus, look at that picture. I've never looked at a photograph from a technical angle and said, oh my God, look at that. It's incredible. Even the stuff that was being done in the early days of photography, where the techniques were novel and new and people were experimenting, I still was not that jazzed by it. So I'll take mood over that any day. So think about winter as a mood. Think about your mood as a human being, and can you reflect that in a series of photographs? I said series. Do not even think for a second you're going to go out and hit one frame and you think your assignment's over. I think in story, and I'm forcing you to think in story. No singles, no randoms, photo essay, photo story, series of images to reflect your mood. Number 3, when you work in the winter, depending on where you are, my advice is to simplify your gear setup. When it's summer, spring, fall, and you're out and you've got a backpack full of gear, or even cooler, maybe you've got a 1980s bodybuilder fanny pack that you've got some lenses in. Maybe you're even wearing those puffy pants that the bodybuilders wore in the 1980s. I'm not here to judge. I don't know, maybe they're good for holding gear. But whatever it is your system is, when it's hot out, it's pretty simple to put the pack down and move things around. When you're standing on 12 inches of powder, and you're trying to change lenses and that snow's blowing around and you're taking lenses off your body and the snow's blowing in and you got to put your bag down and it's getting wet, simplify the system. Also, think about using cameras that are mechanical. I mean, my Hasselblad in the winter is awesome. My Fujis, I've never taken the Fujis into a scenario where they failed in the winter, but I probably could make them fail if I tried. So simplify the gear, think about manual cameras. And the other thing, which is a helpful tip, which most of you already know, I'm sure, is if you are in a legitimately cold climate, if it's 10 degrees outside and you're sitting in a condo where the heat's on and it's 80 degrees, and you take your cameras from that 80-degree setting out into a 10-degree, they're gonna fog and be completely useless. Now, you can still stand there and put out the vibe. You can hold the gear around your neck and then talk on your phone or have your GPS unit in your hand to make it look like you're doing something cool. That always works. I've seen photographers do this at parties for years, especially the people wear the scarves. You know, they stand at the party and they put out the vibe. Simplify the gear, and I think you'll be happier. One, I'm a fan of simplifying your gear all the time. Hypocrite. Me and my one lens, one camera, hypocrite. But you know what I mean. Okay, clothing. This may not be sexy, but it's essential. I just did a run this morning, a short run, 3 miles only. I do that 3 days a week, and then I do one long run at some point during the week. But 3 miles, today it was 36 when I ran. Yesterday it was 21. Those require, for me, different things. To be comfortable and to make the experience fun, but also to not literally freeze. So 21 degrees and it was a ripping wind out of the north. Head, hands, feet. Those are things that are essential. Your core, if you're moving around long enough or enough, will heat up and you'll be surprisingly okay, even in thin layers. But your head, your hands, and your feet are essential. So let's talk a little bit about head. This, my friends, is not really a winter hat. Even though it's felt, it's not straw. So yeah, okay, this is, if I was gonna wear a cowboy hat in the winter, this would be it. But I wear hoodies, and I have a variety of hoodies depending on what I'm doing. I have one that I run in, one that I cycle in, and then two that I go out and photograph in, including one that is an AG23 hoodie. Basic stuff. The hoodie that I run in and the hoodie that I cycle in are hoodies that I can sweat through and they don't rot and fall apart. And I wouldn't cycle or ride a run in a full-on like winter hat that just it's too thick and too bulky. But keep your head warm. Same with your hands. And I brought visual aids for your viewing pleasure. I use at least 5 different pairs of gloves. Now, you might be thinking, what a jerk. You don't need that many pairs of gloves. But hear me out. Again, cycling gloves. Pearl Izumi. I don't like these at all, but I wear them when I'm cycling. One, for padding, and two, they do give me a little bit of extra warmth. And there's nothing worse than being 30 miles out into a 60-mile ride and your body is fine and your head is fine and your hands are literally, you're banging them on the handlebars to try to get blood back into them. That has happened far too many times to me, and I don't want it to ever happen again. Most of the gloves that I wear are made by Beyond, out of Seattle, Beyond Clothing. They're the relationship partner with AG23. Whatever brand you choose is fine with me, but there's a rationale behind what I wear and why. These are Beyond gloves that are the lightest weight Beyond gloves I have. This is a mesh on the back that gets air through it, but they're leather, and they also have that fingertips that allow me to work with my cell phone. All of these gloves do, by the way. And these are fantastic for when I am in and around town working and I'm not out exposed to the elements for a long period of time because they're not warm enough for that. Mid-level Beyond gloves. I love these. I wax these with the Beyond Bee-Balm. They're not waterproof, but that Bee-Balm really helps to keep them water resistant. These are the ones I ride my motorcycle in. These are my work gloves. These are probably the gloves that I wear the most, and I would call them the mid-layer. They're a little bulky for camera operations, but they do have, again, the finger that allows me to use the screens, the touch screens, and I have made pictures in these quite a bit. The last of the Beyond art is the high-level like expedition glove, and this is actually 2 pairs of gloves in one. It's a synthetic fill outer glove with a tight liner on the inside, so it's 2 gloves in one. These are the warmest gloves I have, and they are also fantastic to photograph in. And if you ever get in trouble, you just pull off the top glove, and you have the super tight secondary glove inside, and that also has the touchscreen capability. I also ride my bicycle in those. Those were not designed for cycling, but I've not found a cycling glove that keeps my hands warm like those expedition gloves. They're not designed for it. My guess is that cycling them is going to wear them out really fast. But again, when it's so cold and you're trying to ride and everything is good except for your hands, it sucks. It's miserable. It's like these people who camp with no sleeping bag. Again, this is crazy. I'm gonna go to minus 25 and I'm gonna, no tent, no tarp, no quilt. I'm just gonna lay on the ground for views and I'm gonna sleep in this conditions. I'll tell you how it is right now. It sucks, and there's no reason to ever do that unless your plane goes down and you have no other choice. The last pair of gloves is this little doozy right here. These are Patagonia, and they are fingerless or tipless gloves, whatever you want to call it. Now this, my friends, I've had these for years. These have been, and they are falling apart. I mean, if I even pull this off wrong, it's going to disintegrate, but it was well worth the money. These are when I have heavy photographic lifting to do, where my primary responsibility when I'm outside and I'm doing this stuff is that I am making pictures and I cannot screw around. So yes, I want a little bit of warmth on my hand, but more importantly is my fingertips are free. I also used to do a lot of shooting when I was younger, rifle, pistol, shotgun. I was a competitive shooter, and I had a ton of different gloves that had fingerless, because that really helped when I was working with different firearms and that kind of things. Cameras are very much the same, especially with little dials and buttons and menus. These gloves are great, and they're also completely weightless. They just have absolutely no heft to them. Another thing that I wear all the time is a buff. And if you don't know what a buff is, think Zapatista. But it's basically a wrap that goes around your neck that protects you from the wind and the sun. This one in particular has all these mouth holes, so you look like Bane from Batman. Oh, Gotham. This is the one I wear when I'm running, so it doesn't impact the flow of air. Buffs are amazing, and I also pull it up over the back of my head when it's really cold. It's an extra layer. Now, let's just talk about quick layering system, and this is just my layering system. It may not work for you depending on where you are. Everybody has their own system. Whatever you do, if it makes you happy and it works, that's fine. I wear a base layer. Big shock there, big shock. Newsflash. Outdoor expert weighs in, base layer. Yes, I wear a base layer, sometimes short sleeve, sometimes long sleeve, and sometimes both, depending on how cold it is and how much I'm gonna sweat. I'm a sweater, did I mention that? My father used to eat dinner with a towel around his neck. No joke. Even at a restaurant, he would wear a towel like he was sitting at the gym on the bench press machine. Oh, and by the way, if we had Thai food or we had good Mex that was spicy, my father would literally be like, it'd be like a boxer between rounds, the cornermen toweling him off. It was hilarious. I don't sweat quite like that, but I'm a sweater. So the layering system that I have, I got to be careful because I have to err on the lighter side and the breathable side. Otherwise, I'll be the sweat hogs. So base, mid layer, here's where we get fun. So a mid layer for me, the key to the mid layer is a hood. Now I use this Solaris pullover from Beyond. That's my primary mid layer. And it has a hood, and it has a big hood that wouldn't fit over this hat, but it would fit over a baseball hat, hoodie, not hoodie, but any kind of winter hat it fits over. That is absolutely key. I never wore hoods ever until I moved to New Mexico. So that's my mid layer. The third thing I wear is an outer layer that's often very lightweight, and the key is it has to have a little bit of warmth, but it has to have wind protection. And I have probably worn this jacket more. I have purposely abused this jacket, which is a weird jacket from Beyond called a dash jacket. And as you can see, the insulation stops at the elbow. So what goes from the elbow to the forearm is not insulated. And this is cool because it gives you dexterity that I don't have in other jackets. I have sweat through this jacket. I know it's gross. Just bear with me here, people. If this is too traumatic for you, then I don't know. Go have a ho-ho or a ding-dong. Those are my favorites in middle school. That thing, I've sweat through it purposely. It's great. And the thing is, it's very lightweight. You get great dexterity, and it's windproof. So it has a wind layer on it. That's the key out here for me is the wind. Second layer is when the sun goes down. That's typically how it works for me. I ditch the dash jacket and I go to a little bit thicker thermal layer on top. And then the last is I have a thing called a belay jacket. It's another Beyond jacket. It doesn't look like much and it doesn't feel like much. It's really lightweight, but it is the most unbelievably warm jacket I've ever had. And when I'm camping and it's 20 degrees or below and I'm outside, even if I have a fire, I will often have that jacket on the entire time. Sometimes I sleep in that jacket in the van because the van, if it's 20 outside, it's going to be darn close to 20 inside. And anything under 20 in the van sleeping, and yes, I do have a little heater that I can turn on, but I prefer not to. So again, don't judge me. And then finally, winter photography, depending on where you are. For those of you who don't live where the precipitation comes in frozen form, but comes in that overcast, gray, painful winter sky that often comes in sleet and rain, good rain gear. Good rain gear is one of my favorite things in the entire world. Hard to believe it's July. It's mid-50s, rain, cool. Got my new rain gear on, and we are after some trout on the fly. I've always loved good rain gear, and I think I told this story before, but when I was in probably elementary school, I made my first trip to the Northwest Territories to go fish for big pike. Big pike, tank walleyes, lake trout, smallmouth bass, with casting equipment, spinning equipment, and also fly rods. And so my father and I fly up there, and my father in his infinite wisdom had gone to the grocery store and bought rain gear for the both of us, tops and bottoms. And I was stoked because, again, have I mentioned how I love rain gear? I'm putting this tripod down for no reason. So we get up there. It's freezing cold. There's snow blowing sideways. We're in an 18-foot Lund boat. There's 3 of us. And the snow, it's a whiteout, blizzard conditions. And we're wearing the world's worst rain gear. And within about 8 minutes, we were both wet. And I was like, mental note, when it comes to rain gear, may want to spend a little more and get something that is waterproof. Think about that concept. Rain gear, waterproof, they kind of go hand in hand. Old Padre, he didn't figure it out. Now, my dad was fat. He was like a walrus. He had a layer of blubber on him that would keep him warm. My father would radiate heat. It didn't matter how cold it was outside. There'd be steam pouring off of him, and he would just smirk and laugh at me because he knew, as a scrawny, the runt of the litter, that I was freezing. My hands are cold, my feet are cold all the time. So again, this layering system, you may take it for granted. I don't because I'm a wuss. So rain gear is good. I've had a million different kinds of rain gear over the years. I have a rain gear that I cycle in from a company called Showers Pass, I think. They're up in Oregon, I want to say, or San Francisco, or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Showers Pass, I love their stuff for cycling. Although I just noticed this morning that the jacket I have from them has rotted, the whole back of it has rotted through. And that's my fault because I sweat in it so much. And if you don't really rinse that jacket every time after you sweat in it, it's gonna rot out. Still works for wind. It's not waterproof anymore. I just got a new set of rain gear, again, from Beyond, and I'm not pushing you to buy Beyond. I'm just saying that that's the gear that I have based through this relationship. And then once I started using it, I was like, okay, this stuff really works for me. They have a new rain kit. I've used it twice. I've never been in an incredible downpour yet, but I'm hoping to. I'm gonna spend the summer elsewhere in a place where it rains a lot. So I'm assuming that I'm gonna get a chance to really test it out. But rain gear doubles with snow and also wind. And that's sort of the final thing. If I have all these other layers on and I'm still cold, I'll throw on like a wind rain layer, and typically it just bakes in the heat. You're like a tamale. And think about your layering system as a corn husk. Not the Richard Nixon try to eat the corn husk. Not that move. Don't know if you remember that, kids. Little political adventure here. Nixon went to San Antonio and they gave him a tamale for the first time, and he tried to eat the husk. So he's a gamer. Old Tricky Dicky was a gamer, but that's not it. Think of your outer layering as the corn husk around and you as the tamale. And I think that's probably a good place to end this film. If anyone is left watching this, I'll be amazed. But I'll be back. I've got a million film ideas. I've got a potential office scenario unfolding here in Santa Fe. Potential office scenario, which would give me a place that actually has internet, because I don't have it here. Would give me internet, would give me an editing bay where I might actually be able to learn something about this little thing called filmmaking. Bye.